Question number 5 states, an atom is made of electrons that have a negative charge, protons that have a positive charge, and neutrons that have no charge. Drag the descriptions of the atoms with a zero charge to the box. This is not the actual test question on Elluminate, so we're not going to drag it around, but I do have the 4 options here, and we're going to look at whether each one represents a zero charge. To help us visualize this, I'm going to use these colored circles. The white circle with the N represents neutrons. The blue circle with the negative represents electrons, since electrons have a negative charge, and the yellow circle with a plus represents protons, since protons have a positive charge. Now remember, an atom with a zero charge will have an equal number of protons and electrons. So the charge balances out, and it's not positive or negative, it's just zero. So let's look at the first example. An atom with 3 neutrons, here we go, 3 electrons, and 4 protons. Now remember, neutrons have no charge, so we don't care how many of those there are, but we need to compare the number of electrons and the number of protons. In this case, there are 3 electrons and 4 protons. There are more protons than neutrons or electrons, which means that this atom has a positive charge. So no, that example does not have a zero charge. For the second example, it says it is an atom with 5 neutrons, 6 electrons, and 6 protons. Again, we don't care how many neutrons they are, it doesn't affect the charge. But if I look at the number of protons and electrons, I see that they are equal. In other words, for every electron, there is a corresponding proton. So since the number of protons and neutrons are equal, it has a zero charge. So yes, this example we would say has a zero charge. Example 3 says an atom with 7 neutrons, 4 electrons, and 7 protons. The number of neutrons doesn't affect the charge. In this case, I have 4 electrons and 7 protons. I have quite a few more protons than electrons, so the charge here is not a zero charge. In fact, you can see that since there are more protons, this atom will have a positive charge. So that is not an example with a zero charge. The last example says an atom with 8 neutrons, 8 electrons, and 8 protons. Again, if we ignore the neutrons, since they don't affect the charge, and compare the number of electrons and the number of protons, there are 8 electrons and 8 protons. So we have an equal number of positives and negatives. That means that they will cancel out, and it will equal, or it will have a zero charge. So the last example, since it has the same number of protons and electrons, is an example of an atom with a zero charge.